Hello and welcome to the second edition of our New South Wales Referees Life Member Series. Today I'm here with a man who has achieved plenty both on and off the field. Another person that I can gladly say is a good friend, graded member number 717. It's Greg McCallum. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, Daniel. Hello, everyone.
How are you doing, Greg, in these difficult times? What are you doing to keep a smile on your face?
Well, I've actually drunk a lot of tea. That's one thing. I'd like to drink my tea, caught up on a few TV programs, but the most, I think, valuable thing is time with the family. It's been wonderful to have some significant time at home and sit down, have dinners together. Carolyn's two children are up here now, and we're looking after them during this crisis. One good thing I've got, though, is I've got a split arrangement with work. Blacktown Council, I go in 1 week on and work from home the other week, so it's working out quite well.
Okay, that works out all right then. So you've got a bit of a balance going on at the moment.
Yeah, it's good balance.
Okay, that's excellent. Before we talk about your on-field career, which is full of achievements, I wanted to touch on your equally busy off-field career. If we look at your rap sheet here, you've got celebrant, formerly on the match review committee, the New South Wales Referees Board in multiple roles, stints on radio, New South Wales Leagues Club, and other charities and foundations. Can you tell us a bit about what some of the things you've done off the field throughout your career?
Yeah, Daniel, I've been very fortunate in my life that I've been able to do different things. I started off as a school teacher, of course, and taught for 16 years while I was refereeing. Made the decision to give teaching up when I went to England, which I think we'll speak about a little bit later on. But coming back to Australia was a bit of a challenge because I couldn't go back to teaching. Once I think you depart the teaching scene, it's very difficult to go back to. And I took on the role at the NRL. I worked there for 10 years doing the match reviews, which is very similar to the refereeing structure. It's all about compliance. And it's equally, you're equally unpopular on the match review committee as you are as a referee. So nothing really changed there. Yep. But it was a great opportunity to be involved. And then I became a celebrant, do probably 30 marriages a year, naming ceremonies, as you would know. And in recent years, I've been doing some funerals, which, while they're very sad, not like happy events like marriages, you still feel that you've done a good service to the community. So all of those roles combined with being on the National Welfare Committee of the Men of League Foundation keeps me busy as well. And also my work at Blacktown Council.
So I just wanted to touch on your celebrancy for a moment. You've had quite a few New South Wales referee, I suppose, people in the family that you've wedded. Can you name a few people that you've conducted ceremonies for?
Yes, Daniel and Imogen was one last year, of course. It was a very enjoyable wedding. I also emceed the event afterwards. And also Gavin Badger when he married Casey. And that was at North Head, and it was on a very windy day, very similar to today. And we had to dodge the ceremonial part at the front there that we were standing between, blew over a couple of times. So that was quite challenging. And Bradley Clyde is a really good mate of mine from the game. I did his wedding a few years ago up in Newcastle. So yeah, it's always exciting time to be involved with people that you don't know in weddings, but it's far better to be involved in weddings where you know the people. So that was very, very enjoyable as well.
You touched on, you've recently got into, I suppose, for lack of a better term, the other side, doing funerals. How do you find, I suppose, putting on that persona or that character for that period of time? You did Lance Thompson's? You spoke about
Yes,
Lance
I've
Thompson,
done a couple of ex-players. Lance Thompson a couple of years ago. It was a very big funeral, very sad, of course. They're all sad, but he had a very young family. And that was held down at Cronulla. And at the beginning of the year, I did Mark Harris's funeral. Mark, of course, was a great rugby league player for the Roosters. Worked with me on the match review committee for 6 out of the 10 years. Wonderful, good-hearted guy, loving family. And it was a very, very big funeral as well. So both of those funerals had in excess of 750 people at them. So big events, but that showed the status that the two guys were held in. Other funerals in recent times, of course, have been quite small. I did a ceremony for Theo Burgess, who some of the older members would know. Theo was a very highly regarded recruitment manager for Melbourne Storm and put the Melbourne Storm team together in 1998 that won the premiership the next year. And it was at the beginning of the shutdown, and we could only have 9 people graveside for that. So that was quite sad to see a guy of his standing go out with such a small number of mourners. But that's the way it is at the moment, and hopefully in the future, some of those funerals that have been held can come back as memorials and celebrate their life a little bit more formally.
And I suppose, do you find it hard distancing yourself when you do have that connection with the person?
In some ways, there are moments during the ceremony where people are speaking about them in eulogies, where you actually sit there and you realise what you're involved in, and your own personal memories come back, and you tend to drift along with those thoughts during the ceremony. But in all of these things, you're doing a job, you're doing a service for people, and at the end of it, you want to walk away knowing that the service you provided for them was the best you could do.
Yeah. On to some more positive things. You spent a bit of time in community radio.
Yeah, love that. Really enjoyed it. I did it at up in the Hills area, and I've done a little bit of work up on Moreton Bay Sports Radio, where I do some commentary on the game up there. It keeps me connected to the game. It keeps me involved, and it keeps you, I suppose, in a lot of ways relevant to the role that you've had in the past into the role that you have now. And the issue for us all, of course, is to find the right line to tread. Too many people get involved in the media and become very critical of things. I try and find the positive side out of it all. But at the end of the day, if you're making a comment publicly, you've got to be true to yourself as well. So that's where the balance is also quite challenging.
All right, let's go all the way back to the start, where it all began. You were playing football, I believe, for Cromer and Forestville. How did you get into refereeing in those early days in the Manly district?
Yeah, I played in rugby union for DY Lions. So we used to play rugby league during the week at school, rugby union on Saturdays, rugby league on Sundays. So, probably played in something close to 300 games, I suppose, as a youngster. Got up to B grade and caught glandular fever. And glandular fever is quite a debilitating disease, and it really knocks you around physically and mentally. And in the end, I couldn't go back on the field. I came back at the end of the season for the semi-finals, wanting to play after being out for 12 weeks, as you always do, trying to play in the semi-finals. And unfortunately, we had 2 players carried off on a stretcher in the first half of the game. And I started off the game sitting next to the coach, and by half-time I was sitting down the end away from him because I knew that I couldn't go out there. I just wasn't hard enough to go out. Took up coaching for a season with Cromer in the under-7s, and had a great second half run to the season, but one of the dads was on the committee of the Cromer
politics
club, and he wanted to coach the side. So that was my first real introduction to politics in rugby league. So I was sacked after 1 year.
Okay. And then, so you made inquiries about refereeing, or did you?
Yeah, well, I went. I had a guy named Clive Rogers who was a wonderful guy that used to coach me at school, and I lost contact with him for a few years. And I happened to be at the races one day, and he was a bookmaker. And he said to me, "What are you doing with yourself?" I said, "I've just been sacked as a coach in the under-7s." So he said, "Well, I've just got my referee's ticket. I'm 65 years old now, and why don't you get yours?" And I said, "You've got to be joking. Why would I want to be a referee? I just finished fagging them as was coach." And he said, "No, seriously, I want you to come down, and I think you might make a referee. I can make a referee out of you." So went to the Manly Leagues Club and did the coaching that they do there on the board, and then went off to the Leagues Club about 6 weeks later and had Don McDonald and Cole Pearce as my examiners, and got through the exam and got my referee's ticket. That was in 1979, and I'd been doing some trial games in the Manly competition prior to that. So I suppose it was something that was always in me to be a referee, and getting the ticket then formalised that, and off I went.
So you're graded member number 717. Can you tell us a little bit about the story from then moving into grade up until sort of your first grade debut?
Yeah, it was. I did the President's Cup final in 1981, and we had at Manly some tremendous mentors there. We had Barry Cross, Jack Jewell, Phil Ellis, who were all on the referees appointments board, and a guy named Frank Walsh, of course, who was the secretary of the New South Wales Referees Association. So we had great background there, and it was a really supportive environment. And I did, actually, the year before in 1980, I refereed two SG ball games before I was dropped out of the centre onto the line. And I was just told that I was too raw, too inexperienced. But during the year, TNT, at the time, one of the great sponsors that the referees had a coaching unit. And two guys, wonderful people involved in the game, Reg Dick and Carl Gilchrist, the father, of course, of Brian.
Right.
And they came out to Nolan's Reserve at Manly and watched me referee an under-12s game. And they'd go away. They didn't say much after the game, but they went away and analysed the game, and then came out to the Referees Association meeting about 6 weeks later. And from then on, I seemed to be back in favour, I suppose, showed a little bit that I had, and then started off the next season in President's Cup and did the grand final. So I was fortunate, and it taught me very early on, Daniel, that timing is everything in the game. Timing involved in getting your opportunities, but you've got to be there to take your opportunity. You know, you can't be sitting back on your laurels thinking, well, you know, they've passed me by, I'm not really in favour or whatever. You've got to be ready to go. And in 1981 I was, and went through and refereed the grand final, and then didn't get graded afterwards, which was great. I got graded at the end of the season. So I went back to Manly, did the A-grade grand final, and I think that really toughened me up, ready for grade.
Now, your first grade debut comes in round 23 of 1983. I've got in the background here, I'm at Lidcombe Oval. It's Western Suburbs versus the Cronulla Sharks. Can you tell us a bit about your memories leading into the match itself, probably the week leading up, the game itself? I mean, I think Western Suburbs back then, that was a pretty tough place to go.
It's so exciting, and I get goosebumps even just thinking about it now. I was in reserve grade for about 8 weeks leading up to it, and Dennis Braybrook actually tore a hamstring in a game the week before, and so there was a vacancy there, and you could tell by the reserve grade appointments whether you were getting closer or further away from the first grade game, and I'd been doing the top reserve grade games for a few weeks, so I had my fingers crossed. And the way you found out, you used to get up at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, run down to the news agency, find the paper, and there were the referees' appointments for the week. And there I was, Western Suburbs versus Cronulla first grade. Greg McCallum, that was my first appointment, first grade, and unforgettable game in front of about 2,500 people, mostly friends and family, I would say, Wests and Cronulla. But the main thing out of that game, apart from some of the greats that played in it, Andrew Eddinghausen was there, Dane Sorensen was playing, Warren Boland for Wests. But the big thing was that Terry Lamb played in that game, and Terry Lamb was playing for West at that time. He was a 5'8", and remarkably, he was in my very, very last game in 1994 as well. So it was a span of 11 years, and Terry Lamb was in my first and last game. But I've got to say, two guys that really helped me that day were Ronnie Pearce and John Colenso. They were my two touch judges and really helped me through what was quite a nerve-wracking experience to go out and referee first grade. But what a great place to referee at Lidcombe Oval.
It's interesting how those parallels come through time. I mean, I had listened to an interview with you before, and I did know that stat, and I actually did a little bit of research, and the Bulldogs were actually the team that you refereed most in first grade with 46 games. So yep. I don't know, down the track, you might be able to find Terry Lamb might actually be the player that you actually refereed the most from West through to Canterbury. It's quite interesting. Yeah,
it would be, and those stats are available to us now. Not back when I started refereeing, statistics were something of the future, but now you can actually trace your career right back, and club supporters can actually work out how many times you refereed them. But, you know, for the good clubs, for successful clubs, they have a better success rate under you than the unsuccessful clubs. And right through my career, you tended to referee based on where you were positioned in the top group of referees. And if you were going well, you were generally up on the TV games either on the Saturday or the Sunday. Now it's spread out a lot more, and you've got two referees. But back then, it was very much a concentrated appointment on performance. And basically, recruitment in those days, Daniel, was a kick up the backside and 8 weeks in reserve grade. That was called development.
So coming from your time as a junior and early in the grade ranks, were there any referees that you looked up to in particular or modelled your game on, or you sort of preferred to be an individual and have your own thoughts?
No, absolutely. There were guys there that back when I started refereeing, you used to go for a drink after the game, and you'd go back to the pub, and if John Gosher was refereeing the game, he'd be there, and whoever refereed reserve grade, and you'd sit down and you'd chat for an hour, and it sort of brought collegiality into refereeing, which I think we lost after that when the non-drinking and driving came in. John Gosher definitely. Kevin Roberts was another. Kevin Roberts probably mentored, without him knowing it, more referees than anybody else. Kevin had this magnetic personality that you would always want to be talking to him, and he was the top referee in that early part of my career. And whilst I didn't model myself on anybody, I learned a lot from Kevin Roberts. No nonsense. He was in charge. He was a policeman, of course, a detective. And whenever you're on the field, you had to be the person in charge and make sure that any conversation that was started by you and finished by you, not by the invitation of the player.
This probably ties into my next question, but just one without notice. A lot of referees tend to be teachers or policemen. Do you have any thinking behind that? Are there any parallels there, being a teacher yourself?
Yeah, look, I think it's to do with being able to put yourself in front of people, to be able to talk clearly, to be able to understand the rules, and there's a compliance aspect. And right through my life, I've always been involved in industry or roles that are very highly compliant, where there are a set of rules, you apply the rules, you're consistent with the rules, and you're not afraid to make decisions. And I think they're the main issues. Can you imagine a school, Daniel, where somebody wasn't prepared to make a decision? There'd be anarchy. It's the same on the field. If the referee isn't prepared to make decisions, then you do get anarchy on the field. And I suppose that's the connection that police and teachers do have. A guy, so Mick Stone, was from the tax agency, and Mick was a good friend of mine, a good colleague of mine, and still is. And his background in taxation made him a person of compliance as well. So it's no secret that people involved in rules and regulations and compliance give the refereeing aspect a good start.
So that sort of goes into my next question. I was going to say you were noted for being a referee with firm control and good communication, but at the same time, you just talked about compliance, but you also allowed the game to flow when required. Can you talk to us about how that is probably, seeing we've touched on the previous aspects, how that allowing the game to flow, finding that balance is still vitally important?
Plenty of people get given the whistle to referee, and some get it, some don't, in terms of your role in the game. The first thing you do in the game is that you have to provide the environment of safety for the players. And I've been involved in the English game and was over there when it wasn't a safe place for players to play, and we fixed that up over time. But, your role as a referee is to provide the right environment. If the players feel safe to be able to play without being knocked around too much, then you're going to get the position where they'll play good footy. You blowing the whistle throughout the game is not going to help anybody. It only frustrates people. And as a result, you get to the situation where too many penalties in the game can ruin the game. I was coached right through my career to minimise penalties, use your voice, get out there and get into the mind of players, into what they're doing out there, and making sure that you give them the best opportunity to play the game. And in response, they'll give you a better effort in trying to play the game as well, rather than trying to manipulate the rules. So a bit of a long-winded answer to that, but it comes down to what you allow on the field, and the environment that you set, I think, provides the opportunity for the players to play the game.
We might talk about your state of origins now and your city countries and test matches. So you had 4 origins. You refereed city country in 1993, and you had multiple test matches. You actually refereed the first state of origin in Melbourne at Olympic Park. Can you tell us a bit about your rep career and the experiences I suppose you had in that, and how you found it compared to regular week-to-week action in the New South Wales Rugby League? So how was that experience for you?
Well, ironically, I started off doing test matches first. I was appointed in 1988 to a number of test matches before I'd refereed my first Origin game. Excuse me. And that was exciting. It was great to be involved in representing your country and taking leave to go overseas and participate. In 1988, I did my first Origin game was the third one, which was a dead rubber, and played at the Sydney Cricket Ground in front of about 16,000 people, which was quite remarkable. I had all the players. Wally Lewis was playing for Queensland. Wayne Pearce was playing for New South Wales. Cliff Lyons, Desi Hasler. It was a funny match. Queensland won the game. Sam Bacco scored 2 tries, was the man of the match. But it was a great achievement to be able to do that. Then I waited till 1989. Then the same thing happened. I did a number of test matches in England, 2 tours. I went over to do England and France, and then later in the year refereed in England to do the New Zealand and England Test Series, all before I refereed a grand final. So there were people I was competing with time and time again that were doing them. Bill Harrigan had come on the scene. He was doing the grand finals then. But I was the preferred referee for the test matches because I was a neutral. You had to referee under the neutral system. And Great Britain in particular liked the way I refereed, and I got a number of trips to England. When the grand final came around to do, it changes your attitude, I think, towards your achievements in the game. If I hadn't done a grand final, I would have been devastated, I think, had I look back on my career. But, you know, the opportunities don't come around very often. And again, it comes down to timing. Bill Harrigan, well, before Bill, Kevin Roberts had done 3 grand finals. Mick Stone had done 3 grand finals. Bill Harrigan had done 3 grand finals. And Don Ferner was the coach of the referees at the time, and he was very even-handed with the way that he approached the appointments of referees, and he was quite neutral in what he did. And I suppose my opportunity came at a time when Bill was under a little bit of pressure with the game in what he was doing off the field. He was doing a lot of talking and events off the field. And basically, I think he put himself on a collision course with the game. And John Quayle, who was the administrator at the time, the general manager of the game, took the view that, you know, perhaps another referee should be given the opportunity that probably wasn't as high profile as Bill at the time. And Graham Annesley and myself were appointed to the semi-finals in 1992, which caused quite a turmoil in the media because Bill was very popular in the media and it was considered to be the top referee. And Graham and I got the opportunity. We got through the first round of the semi-finals okay, and then I went on and refereed the grand final and did the next 2 after that. So for me, the grand finals came at the back end of my career, and the test matches and the origins came at the beginning. So it's an interesting situation to look back on. Obviously, I'm very pleased that I was able to do the 3 of them, Test, Origin and Grand Finals, but I think if I'd missed out on not done a Grand Final, I would have been pretty dirty.
Yep. Just before we talk about those specifically, I've heard a funny story you've told before about Quayle and Ferner in terms of how you would receive your appointments. I think it would be quite interesting if that happened nowadays, if our partners and wives found out beforehand. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that story?
Well, John Quayle, to say he didn't like referees wouldn't be fair, but he didn't have much time for them at the time because he felt that the game and the players were more important than referees. And referees, we were well looked after by the Referees Association, and we had sponsorship there, and all of our gear came through that. When you were appointed to a game, there was little fanfare about your appointment, little announcement about it. So John, whilst he was a great administrator, I don't think he was too fussed about referees. And he wouldn't put the names in the programs.
Yep.
And I've got all the programs that date back to the beginning of the game. And there's that period in the early 80s that referees' names weren't in the program. And you didn't know your appointment until you came home from training on a Wednesday night. You go to training Wednesday night, you come home and your wife would tell you what your appointment was because they'd ring home while you were at training. So people wouldn't spread around the appointments and talk about them. When it came to big games, you used to get a phone call. And for my first grand final in 92, the Broncos and the Dragons, I'd refereed, as I said, those early games in the semi-final series. And Don Ferner rang me about 4 o'clock on the Monday and he said, open up the conversation, how are you going? I said, okay. He said, how'd you go on the weekend? I said, oh, well, it was an interesting game. It was 4-0 to Illawarra, to St George to put them through to the grand final. I disallowed about 4 or 5 tries to Illawarra. All proven to be correct in the passing of time, although the Illawarra supporters won't ever wear that. But he said, what time do you want to referee next Sunday? And I said, I suppose 3 o'clock. He said, okay, you can have that game. That was how he told me I had the game. So that was very exciting, and it was a great moment that I'll never forget, receiving that phone call. But, it was right like that all the way through with Don. Don was just this laid-back, wonderful administrator, and there wasn't much about the game that he didn't know or understand. And I think his appointment as referee's boss for only 2 years, I thought was a great time for the game because it just stabilised everything and took the heat out of the refereeing appointments and the personalities that were starting to build within the Referees Association.
So let's talk about that 1992 grand final now. Really, at the end of the day, the Dragons ended up being not much of a chance in the end. It was a shutout. How did you find the game?
Oh, it was exciting. In fact, being your first grand final, I remember standing there before the game at the national anthem, and actually Bill had said to me before the game, he said, that'll be the thing that'll stick in your mind. And it's a wonderful moment to be standing out there with the national anthem being played. The game, the first half was, reasonably even. The Broncos just always looked like they were going to score. And then Alfie Langer pinched a try, it's just on the screen now, just after half time. And that swung the game the Broncos' way. And they were never to be beaten that day. Alan Cann, the second rower, played the game of his life, scored 2 tries, seeing one about to be scored here. And then Steve Renouf made that magnificent 80-metre run that's really tested my sprinting ability to try and keep up with him. But I've known Steve Renouf in my greatest ever team. He's just a wonderful player. And I don't think he ever got the recognition in the wider game that he should have got. He was just a speed machine and had this marvellous ability to score tries. And the try scores coming up now in the grand final was just wonderful.
So now we move on to 1993. This time the Broncos come from 5th place. The Dragons really probably should have won this based on their season. How did you find it, the game, but also how did you find, firstly, going back to back? So being your first grand final and then getting another grand final the year later.
Well, it doesn't happen very often, that sort of thing in terms of clubs. And yeah, you're right. St George were by far the better side all through the year. They smashed the Broncos twice during the year. I did both of those games in the competition proper. The Broncos were lucky really to make the finals, and the Dragons, I thought, were odds-on favourites that day. But again, you had Kevy Walters, Alan Langer, just in great form. They gave their 2 opportunities or 3 opportunities to score. They scored from them. St George only had a couple, and they got off to a bad start, though. Jason Stevens had his finger torn off in the first set of 6 tackles. He got it caught in Glenn Lazarus's jersey, and it tore it down to a tendon. And it was after about 2 minutes, they brought him over to me and said, look, Greg, look where his thumb is. And it was hanging by a tendon. It was the worst injury I've ever seen, ever. And Jason was replaced. And the Dragons never really kicked on after that. They missed his size and ability in the middle of the field. And the Broncos, they just dominated the Dragons again. And the Dragons, try as they did, they just couldn't get out of second gear. They were just fodder, really, for the Broncos, who I think pinched that second grand final. Good luck to them winning back-to-back, and hasn't been done, of course, until the Roosters did it in 18 and 19. But that shows you how difficult it is.
And they were the first from 5th place, I think?
Canberra, I think, finished outside the top 4 when they won in 89. Okay. So, yeah.
So then we move on to 1994. So this is your 3rd straight grand final. You refereed the major semi-final, where these two, they matched up a couple of weeks earlier, and the Bulldogs nicked it by 1 point with a field goal to Daryl Halligan. Yep. This one was a bit different. It was virtually over from the kickoff. Martin Bella dropped the ball, and then it was all Canberra for the rest of the day. Now, this is 260-odd games after your first game at Lidcombe Oval. I believe here you do know that this is your last game at the time. How did you approach this game going out, knowing that you were moving on to other roles in England at the time?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the league and John Quayle for appointing me to the game, because it would have been easy when I went to see them in July to say that I was going to England. It would have been easy for them to have pushed me aside. And also to Mick Stone, because Mick Stone was the referee's coach. And both Mick and John Quayle said to me, well, where do we go from here? What do you want to do? I said, well, I'd like to referee the season out. And John Quayle said, what, and do another grand final? And I said, well, that's not really up to me. And he said, well, it is up to you. He said, you go out there and referee well and give us no reason to take it off you, and you'll be there. That's the words that were said to me. And Mick Stone nodded, and that was how I walked out of the meeting. And I honestly had thought that the game I'd done on the Sunday between South and Canberra was my last game ever. I thought when I went to see John Quayle to tell him I was going to England, that would have been the end of it. But I did have an ally in Ken Arthurson. Ken Arthurson and I went back a long way to my time in Manly. And Ken was a guy that was a tremendous administrator as well. And I'd spoken to Ken about the job, and he said, it's my decision. If you want to go over there, it'd be great for the game to get an Australian, not necessarily me, but an Australian over there to straighten up their referees, he said to me. And he was supportive as well. So I suppose I was lucky that, again, I had people who were mentoring me throughout my life could see the wider picture, because it would have been so easy to have been brushed and not been involved. But the game itself, Daniel, yes, Martin Bella knocked on from the kickoff. Canberra scored fairly quickly after that. And again, it was a one-sided grand final. So, the 3 grand finals I did weren't decided by golden point, weren't decided by extra time. They were 3 reasonably brilliant performances by the great Broncos side twice, and an equally great Canberra Raiders side in that 94 game.
And no controversy?
Well, no. There was no controversy really in any of the games. It was just a good way to finish each season, particularly this game, because it was my last, and I knew it was my last, and Mal Meninga's last game too. So, and there's Terry Lamb in my last game as well. So, look, it was a very exciting time, but it was then also the time to move on to other things in England.
So you touched on it briefly there with Ken Arthurson. How did that link come across with England? The link to come to be manager of the referees. How the opportunity?
Look, it was a few years in the making. As I said, I went 4 times to England to referee the New Zealand-England series twice, in 89 and 93, and France and England twice in 88 and 89. And I got on well with the guys over there, the referees. When you go over to tour over there, you've got to absorb yourself into their system, because you do a lot of club games, you spend a lot of time with them. So I knew a lot of them. They had a referee leader called Fred Lindop, very famous name over there. But Fred Fred couldn't work really with the administration that they had there. Maurice Lindsay was in charge, ex-Wigan chief executive. He ran the game, with an iron fist, really. And I got on well with Maurice, refereed Wigan a number of times when I was there. And he asked me to do a report in 1993 on the structure of the game, how the structure in Australia could be brought into the system there to bring their referees up to speed in terms of fitness and basically change their attitude and take the control of the refereeing structure away from the clubs, because basically the clubs ran it. The strong clubs had more say than the weaker clubs, and it was a bit of a mess, really, and I pointed all that out. And when I came back in 1993 after the series over there, he said, thanks for the report. He said, the job's yours whenever you want it. So okay. I suppose I went into the 1994 season with it in the back of my mind that at some time in the future I'd go over to coach referees, and that came up in the middle of the year. A bit of a, I suppose, a controversial story. I did the World Club Challenge between Wigan and 94. Brisbane Broncos, which the Broncos were beaten by Wigan. There was a match on a State of Origin match in Melbourne coming up, and it was New South Wales's appointment. In those days, Queensland appointed one, followed by New South Wales. Bill had been appointed to do game one by Brisbane, by the Queensland Rugby League, which in itself was very controversial. And then I got selected. I was told to do game two. Now, the problem was that Wally Lewis was the coach of the Queensland side, and Wally wasn't involved with the Broncos side that were beaten. He made a number of comments in the press afterwards. He obviously didn't want me to do the game and was angling for me not to do it. And the pressure built after the match, and for 3 days I was originally taken off the Winfield Cup games because I was doing the Origin, and then on the Thursday night someone buckled and I was basically replaced by Graham Annesley. And Graham was quite embarrassed about it at the time. He rang me to say, oh, I've just got a phone call that I'm doing the game. And I said, right, well, good luck to you. But it was probably the trigger, really, for me to start to consider where I was in my refereeing career. And I had to be really honest. I'd seen a number of guys finish their refereeing career not in the way they wanted to. It's very difficult when you've been in a position and then all of a sudden you realise that position's not forever. And I made the decision then that perhaps it was time to move on. I was only 37 years of age, but I did have a very chronic knee injury, which has led to my knee being replaced. So whilst I was getting through training, I wasn't excelling at training, and each game, I was getting through the games, but then I was finding it difficult to train afterwards. So in the end, I made the decision to go to England and accept the job. And, it was a big impact on my life. And the timing of it, Daniel, is quite interesting because in the last match of that season in 1994, we were about to go out on the field and Graham Hughes came into the dressing room at Brookvale Oval. I was refereeing Manly in Canberra. And he said, can I have a quick chat? I said, well, Graham, we're going out in the field in 2 minutes. He said, no, I need to talk to you, Greg. I've got one question. So we went into the cubicle and he shut the door behind. I'm thinking, this is very interesting. And he said, what would it cost the game for you to give up your teaching career to become a full-time referee? Now, just thinking back, this is 1994. Super League's about to hit, yep. And the game's about to go through probably a situation similar to what they're going through at the moment, upheaval. And I gave him a figure. He said, well, thanks very much. And of course, didn't help me because I went to England, but it helped other referees after that they took up a full-time position. We were able to get the pressures of working during the week away and become full-time. And but I'll tell you another little story after that. After the Super League issue started, I'd been in England for about 4 or 5 months doing the role as the referees director, and got a phone call when it blew up. I got a phone call from Graham Annesley, and he said, Greg, we've got 4 referees. We want you to come out of retirement and come back and be the 5th referee full-time for Super League. And I said, well, I don't think I can do that because I just signed a contract. I'm in the first 6 months of a contract with the Rugby Football League, and they're affiliated by process with Super League, so I don't think that'll be too much of a problem from their end, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. And then 24 hours later, I got a phone call from Ken Arthurson offering me a full-time job with the ARL.
Yeah.
And I said to Ken, look, I can't do it. I've signed this contract in good faith to coach the referees here, and I've got my family here. So in the end, I knocked back within 24 hours 2 full-time roles to come back out of retirement to referee. And I don't have any regrets on it, though. My time was up. As I said, my knee was shot to pieces and I couldn't really anticipate getting back on the field.
Because I was actually going to ask you about that. The timing of you going to England, you almost avoided some of the, I suppose, politics and strain on friendships and relationships that happened around that time.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't have liked to have been here. The situation in England, and a lot of people don't understand this, Daniel. The RFL, I work for the RFL, and the RFL weren't Super League. There were 10 clubs that were taken by Super League and formed into a Super League competition called Super League Europe. And I remained with the RFL. The difference I had with a lot of what was happening is that I had the referees there, and I had control of the doping drug regulations. I had control of a whole lot of aspects of the game, and basically they couldn't work without my department being involved. So I was a sort of a conduit between the RFL, who was like the ARL, and Super League Europe, who had the major competition. The other thing that we had within the RFL was the Challenge Cup competition, which was heavily sponsored in those days by Silk Cut, who put in over £1 million, and also by the BBC, who broadcasted on free-to-air television. And the rest of the competition, of course, was on Sky Television. So quite lucky, really, to be in a position where I could still service the game from where I was at the RFL without really being tied up in everything else that was going on.
So you come back to Australia and you put quite a bit of time into our association. And in 2011, you're being given the honour of being named a life member. What was that experience like for you, receiving that recognition, even compared to things on the field?
Oh, it's wonderful. There's no greater recognition really to be made a life member of any association, because it's made by your peers. And, you know, you don't have to be mates with everybody. You don't have to be anything other than yourself, and also to, I think, appreciate the work that others do. And there's a lot of people there that have become life members. A lot of guys that I've refereed with, and I respect greatly, you know, the guys who were the great touch judges that were there, the Steve Betts, the Martin Weeks, Barry Ruttles, Michael Ryan, Liz Matthews, all those guys that contributed to the association becoming life members, along with many of my colleagues, Mick Stone, of course, there, Dennis Spagarino, Peter Filmer, all of the guys that I've refereed with are all life members. And you're in this club of people that have been recognised for their contribution both on and off the field. And the New South Wales Referees Association is a magnificent association, and despite its, I suppose, some people's views, it still maintains a very important role in refereeing, and will assume when the game starts up again an even bigger role, because the Country Rugby League Referees Association and the New South Wales Referees Association will merge into one body. And that's one of the roles I've got at the moment as the Executive Officer of Referees, along with Peter Filmer, the Chairman, Matt Hewitt, the Treasurer. Our job is to pull that together. And it'll be a great challenge for us, but it will emphasise the importance that both the Country Rugby League Referees Association, but more importantly ours, has in the game. We've been there since the beginning, and we'll be there for the future. And you know, the more that people can connect to it, the better off they will be in the game. And in times, as we've just seen, it's very, very important to have a solid group behind you, because one out, it's very difficult to win any argument. So very important.
Now, since you finished your refereeing career, I know you talked about impartiality before in terms of commenting in the media. You've often been approached. You've had little stints on Channel 7 or Fox Sports News to make comments on current refereeing matters. Why do you think that is?
Well, I suppose if you true to yourself, you know, people can have opinions on things, but you've got to be able to express those opinions. And I think people come to me for an opinion because of my knowledge of the game. I would like to think that's the case, and the fact that it's delivered in a way that is respectful without being dramatic. And I suppose you're going to always get two sides to any debate, and one side is often pushed a lot harder than the other side. And there's been times where I've been asked to make comment on issues that have taken place in the game that I feel strongly about. And I'm happy to do that. But I'm also happy to promote the game in a very positive light. I think it's a great game in terms of giving so many people an opportunity to be involved at whatever level they want in the game. And the game is good at doing that. But we've got to make sure the game doesn't close in on itself. And I think at the moment, over recent years, and I suppose this is a comment that I make here, I think the game has been quite isolating in using people that should be being used in the game. I think there's been a pattern whereby a group of people have controlled what's gone on, particularly in refereeing, that I believe isn't to the best advantage to the game, because there are people that have come through my era that under the old system would be the people that would be very heavily involved in the game now, but there appears to be this block put there. Let's hope the block can be lifted, because there are very, very talented people out there that could really, I think, accelerate the development of refereeing more than it's been recently.
So obviously there's a lot of changes since the time when you refereed. What's one positive change that you've seen that's been made in either the laws of the game or how the game is refereed in recent years?
Well, I suppose you've got to take some responsibility for the video referee, because we put it together in England long before it came here. It was in 1995 season.
Paris Saint-Germain, I think, was the first.
Yeah, Paris and Sheffield was the first game.
Yeah.
Stuart Cummings was the first referee to use it. It was a gamble. A good mate of mine, Neville Smith, who was the boss at Sky Sports, he came to me with a proposal. Like a lot of things, I said, I don't think it'll work. But he worked on me and he showed me a whole lot of footage and showed me how it could work. And then I had to go to the 32 clubs in England to get them to agree to it. And that was a bit of a battle, because if they could look ahead 25 years to what it's like now, there's no way they would have passed its use. It was never designed to do what it's doing now. It was designed to help in-goal decisions only, particularly where the ball's come loose or is loose on the ground. It wasn't used anywhere else. So, you know, taking things like that forward have been important to the game. I think rule changes come and go. I don't know whether some of the rule changes that are made are in the best interests of the game. I think they're in the best interests of certain people in the game. I think the reliance on coaches to be making rule changes is not right. I think people that understand the rules should be making those decisions, not people who think that they can gain something from it. And I know everybody starts off with a purpose of trying to make things better, but it's very difficult when you've got a situation where you know that something's going to suit your team better or suit your playing style better. Well, then you're always going to push for it. And I think that's happened a lot in the game, and I think we need to stop it. I really do. The game will be a better game when it's put back into the hands, rule-wise, of people that understand refereeing and understand the rules. Because I don't think we're there at the moment. And I think there have been a lot of good changes. The current group of referees, of which you're one of them, Daniel, in that group, are a fantastic group of referees. I saw them come through a lot when I was involved 4 or 5 years ago on the board as the coaching director. And the refereeing is fantastic. The level of commitment and the level of ability is outstanding. And I just wish that you guys could go out and referee the way that you should be allowed to go out and referee, not to try and tick boxes and be overcoached and overanalysed. But during the season when I was refereeing, no one ever spoke to us. You know, we'd get our report on the Sunday leaving the ground. If you got the kick up the backside, you'd be in reserve grade. But if you were still in first grade, you went out and refereed the first grade game. Nobody spoke to you in between. And that was because they didn't want your mind full of stuff that you go looking for. The mere definition of a referee in rugby league or any other sport is you referee with what's in front of you, not to a plan.
Before we head into our Fast Five, either or to finish, I'm going to ask each of our life members this question. Now, I think it's a really important thing to think about, especially in this time when we're all missing the game and we're craving rugby league. What's something that you've enjoyed most from refereeing, be it on or off the field, or something that rugby league's given you the most that you can take away?
Well, for me personally, the ability to be able to go and work overseas and travel to referee overseas. So I rate international matches really highly. So being involved internationally was a big thing for me. To be able to go and ply my trade overseas and then to go and work overseas was particularly gratifying. I've made a lot of great friends in the game as well. So the balance between the collegial aspect and then the ability from a professional point of view to have gone overseas to live and work was astonishing, really, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity. But I don't forget the people that gave me my opportunity. I haven't mentioned one guy who I've got to mention before we finish, Daniel. That's Eric Cox. Eric Cox was director of referees when I got graded. Eric became, and his family, his sons, Chris and David, come down to our event each year to present the Eric Cox medal. Eric Cox was a real rugby league man and a real refereeing man. And he stuck up for the Referees Association year after year after year in at the league, and was very instrumental in getting the TNT sponsorship, which in one small way helped me in my career, but helped a lot of other referees throughout it as well. So I can't go today without mentioning Eric Cox's name, because he was one of the greats.
Certainly, even being a younger member myself, the stories I've heard about Eric and his commitment to the association, and then now his legacy can live on through the Eric Cox medal, is certainly a highlight. All right, to finish off our quick Fast Five, either or. So barbecue or tomato sauce?
Tomato sauce every time.
Oh, good man. Ford or Holden?
Oh, tough one. Ford by a nose.
Oh, we might be saying Ford and Mitsubishi or Ford and Nissan in weeks to come. Now, this one's very applicable to you. State of origin or grand final, and you touched on this.
Yeah, look, I did 5 state of origins and I did 3 grand finals. So I'd have to say grand finals though, because of the 3 internationals, grand finals or state of origin, if I hadn't have done a grand final, as I said, I would have been disappointed. But grand final definitely over state of origin.
Beach or snow?
Beach every time.
And then a curler to finish. Money or free time?
Free time. Love free time.
Yeah, it's good. We've got plenty of that at the moment.
We
All
do.
right. Thank you very much for joining us today, Greg. Stay safe with yourself, Carolyn, and the family, and to everyone else at home, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next time on our Life Members series. Bye for now.
Thank you.